Welcome to the PixelBeast podcast, a podcast for, about, and with the PixelBeast community. I'm your host, Nate Siggard. There are 10,000 PixelBeast NFTs minted on the Ethereum blockchain. PixelBeast owners can access Beastopia, an ever-evolving experience including events, games, and more, alongside VCs, founders, devs, NFT enthusiasts, going down the Web3 rabbit hole together. Today on the PixelBeast podcast, I'm here with Adam Pelavin. He's a writer and an investor and a novelist. Welcome, Adam. Thanks for being here today.
Great to be here.
Your background is in startups. We talked a little bit outside of this about how we both kind of have backgrounds in healthcare tech. And I know you're working actively right now in Web3 and in a lot of creative endeavors. Tell us a little bit about what your background is and what you're working on today.
Yeah, so I'm a novelist, which is going to come up relevantly later. I have a very patient publisher, thankfully. I've been working on the same novel for a very long time because it's both, meant to be a page turner and a mystery and a love story, but also has kind of a very deep philosophical component, let's say. It's a novel about love, math, and a theory of everything. And the thing about writing like that is I absolutely love it, and it takes a very long time before you get to kind of play with readers. And again, that's going to come up a little later in terms of part of what I'm so excited about in Web3 and in PixelBeast in particular. I'm also an investor. Primarily done that in healthcare and startups to date, but I've kind of been very intrigued for, let's say 10 years by the possibility of blockchain and Web3. For me, it kind of started reading Chris Dixon and Fred Wilson, both of whom, I kind of read, going back to the mid-aughts and seeing what they were starting to see in terms of the ultimate potential of blockchain technology to, kind of create another major iteration in the web, one in which, the economics were not so, captured in such a centralized way. And one of the things that I've personally been very interested in is finding new models where creatives in general and writers of fiction in particular, kind of had better economics than exist today for things that they create.
So your interaction with the traditional publishing model has sort of led you to seek out other alternatives, and this is something you've had your eye on for a while now, apparently, that's like really bringing you back around. Is there anything about your novel that you want to share? I mean, I know you're saying it's like the epic love story of all time, but is that something that you're fairly close to being able to publish, or you're still kind of deep in the middle of it? Or
I'm pretty deep in the middle of it. If you zoom the camera out for how long I've been working on this thing, I started the first draft of this in 2005. I've done maybe 4 or 5 complete page one rewrites at various stages. Getting into grad school, the master's thesis, the one that got me the agent, the one that we sold. Ultimately, the one that we sold ended up leading to another page one rewrite, and that's been a several years long process that I'm in the midst of now.
Wow, so you have a very profound sense of long-term vision, which I think is amazing to be bringing into Web3, which is this is such a new kind of boiling, everything is kind of being created instantly. We're running at the speed of light almost, trying to make new things happen. And there's not a lot of long-term kind of planning behind a lot of what's happening. We're sort of wondering one day at a time, what can we do right now to have the biggest impact? So I would say how great to have your, longer term vision and, ability to think about things and how they're going to turn out many years from now as part of the process. So, I do
tend to think in very long time horizons. I tend to think in, 5 and 10 years.
Well, and as an investor, I think that's probably one of like the crucial things that you need, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not the kind of thing where you're thinking I'm going to get a return in a year or two on a company, but typically, right, they say it's about 10 years before you should expect any kind of return on a company if you get one at all.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you get lucky and things take off faster, but that should be the plan going in.
Do you see a lot of crossover with like the investor community and Web3, where they're kind of getting excited by the possibility of shorter term returns than this like 10-year time frame, or in your personal experience, is it still like you're kind of picking up some of these coins with longer term vision in mind, and even now NFTs, is that something?
I think there's a big mix. I think my suspicion, and I don't know, this isn't the area of investing that I know super well. I kind of come from the healthcare world. I've been reading, kind of consumer tech type investors for a very long time, but hadn't been my world to this point. I think my guess would be that the smart VCs in this area are taking that kind of time horizon, because they always do. And they can and they're very good at looking past the, the bubbles and busts, the kind of fury of the moment, and seeing like, well, what's really going to come out of all of this?
Yeah, the massive hype around it right now certainly is feverish.
Yeah, and the speed of the hype cycles and crash in Web3. I mean, I think anyone who looks at it has seen, it's accelerated. It's faster than probably anything we've seen from, peak to trough to back to peak again. And, that's fun. Oddly enough, to me, that makes it seem easier to take a long-term view, because the noise happens so fast that if your focus is on what are we creating here, then, it's almost like blink and you miss it as far as like the bull markets and the bear markets.
Yeah, the recoveries seem to be just as fast as the crashes so far. As far as I've been watching.
Yeah.
So then with NFTs, like, have you been involved buying NFTs for a while? Have you made any NFTs? Was PixelBeast your first?
Kind of dove in a little bit to researching Web3 stuff around the time of the ICO boom. I was just curious, like, okay, how far along is it? What stage is it at? Personally, I just couldn't get that excited about, anything that was either super highly technical or moving money around. If those were the only 2 points of interest, it just wasn't going to be the time for me yet. And my takeaway after looking at a bunch of projects, talking to a bunch of people involved, and some other interesting people who were looking at this was that it felt to me very much still like the internet in the 1980s. And what I said at the time was basically like, I'm gonna watch and wait till it hits the 90s. And at that point, when people are starting to build like silly but fun things, that's, I think, a place where I'll be able to sink my teeth in a little bit more. Something that will kind of it sparked my imagination. I mean, the truth is, some of the stuff 5 years ago did spark my imagination in terms of, things like governance and shared economics and stuff like that. But the use cases weren't kind of interesting enough to me then. So I was like, okay, let me just wait until that kind of 90s era, and then I'm going to start to look. And so then we get to 2021, NFTs start booming. I was very occupied with some other stuff earlier this year. And, but like come summer, I knew that, like, okay, I'm going to start looking to, at least pick up some, and, there's only so much you can learn before you start playing with something. And so then as it happened, my sister saw a project that she wanted. It was Crazy Lemur Club. And so that was enough for me to kind of like boot up MetaMask again, remember how, I bought some crypto kitties years ago and lost the login. They weren't worth anything anyway.
Well, so you've been involved for a little while then. I mean, you did like get a sense of that there was something happening earlier than 2021 in order to pick up a CryptoKitty and kind of...
That's true. I knew what an NFT was. I keep forgetting about that. I knew what an NFT was.
Even if you lost your seed phrase and the wallet is like gone to the dust of time or whatever, you've still been aware of it. I think a lot of people that I've talked to and have been interacting with are still like only becoming aware now. Maybe they only like discovered things maybe this summer or like earlier this year when Beeple started kind of having his like mass success. And I mean I totally agree with you. It was when the ICOs were happening, I was thinking, oh, wow, what an amazing opportunity to potentially raise money and start new companies and kind of have new organizations that are, funded through this sort of like Wild West crowd model. And then, obviously in 2018, after things kind of slowed down a bit, I lost focus on that. And once, for me, it was Beeple. I've been following Beeple for a long time. And so once I kind of saw the excitement building around Beeple and some of his dollar sales and, was like trying to mint his dollar pieces and watching them sell out in like 5 seconds and like realizing like kind of like, whoa, this is a big deal. Like, that's kind of what got my attention too. And so now, I mean, even... and your analogy to the 90s hits so solidly. I've seen other people make similar references, but like it really has that feel for me of like when I got AOL back in the day and was like in chat rooms and, learning how to like build web pages with the like AOL, have your own personal web page builder.
I'm surprised the Coinbase AOL analogy doesn't get made more often.
It's so, and the comparison is like the way that I feel about it anyway is so analogous. Like the comparison and just, I mean, even like the pixel art and the way that a lot of these tools are like very rudimentary, but we're still so excited to like have them and try them out. And even like, you might try one and use it for a few days. And then, a couple of days later, you're like, I don't know, whatever. Look, there's a new one. Let's try that one. It just feels really the same. And like, there's like a levity to it.
Yes.
Between 2010 and 2020, so much of the internet was consolidated. Like RSS seemed like such a big opportunity in the aughts to like decentralize everything and have the semantic web. And,
I still use RSS.
Do you? I mean, like when Google Reader went down, I lost my whole like feed. And
I went to NewsBlur and like stuck with it. And I'm just die hard, like RSS is still a primary way I access information on the web. It can't be the only one because...
Right. Yeah, well, and so many things kind of like moved away from it where, that seemed for a minute, that seemed like it was the future.
Yeah. Someone needs to do a song about the day Google Reader died.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Google Reader. Like, that was such a sad day. I mean, still, I mourn that. But, and then there was so much consolidation between 2010 and 2020 where like we lost our data. We lost our ability to own our data, even to like have a say in the future of things. It seemed like everything had just been so consolidated. All of the power and authority and control over everything just kind of has been owned by these couple of organizations. And all of a sudden now, this is just for the first time again, it feels like, oh my God, like we have the ability to actually control our own destinies again, hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the big wish and vision, I think, behind all of this.
Yeah.
What was it about PixelBeast? Like, how did you discover PixelBeast? And what was it that, that was something that you decided was like your opportunity to kind of get back involved again?
Yeah. Well, so so like I said, I was getting the equipment ready, the tools and stuff to pick up a crazy lemur for my sister. And that project, by the way, it has essentially died, although we did get a couple. But, it was fine. I mean, inexpensive mint, and it got me going. In the process of doing that, I saw the latest issue of a new Substack for graduates of the Claremont colleges in tech. I went to Pomona College. Yohei went to Claremont McKenna, and PixelBeast was featured. And I looked at that and I was like, oh, okay, this was actually more like what I would look for in terms of, just with my, if you're looking at like, kind of pre-seed or seed company, you're mostly looking at the team. It's like, okay, there's VC here, and it's clear that he's got several others in his orbit, and presumably each of them has a network of builders, founders, et cetera, who, will be kind of interested in this project. That's something that I feel like it's going to be more like accessible to me, like what the value of it is. Because I think a lot of NFTs, it has a flavor of fashion. And I can enjoy that, but it's not something that I know from the inside out. And with PixelBeast, it was like, okay, this feels a little bit more like it's got that goofy, fun flavor that I'm looking for in Web3, but it also has a backbone of builders, and just what I understand makes up a really good team to create something over the long term. And so I saw that and I was like, okay, this is like, I'll get, some crazy lemurs because my sister wants to, but I'm going to pick up some PixelBeast and like actually jump into the Discord and, pay attention to what's going on here, et cetera.
Yeah, there's something about like a VC who's got portfolio companies and is managing partners and, like putting their name on the line, I think that goes a really long way. I mean, like a lot of NFT projects don't even have founders who you can know who they are or like know what other things they're involved with or whatever. I mean, certainly most of them aren't even putting their like real life names on them. A lot of things are still done, with pseudonyms or, anonymously. So I'm certainly that seems like it had an impact on you. Was like, this is a person with, a public face and who's got a reputation they need to uphold. So seemingly like that's a pretty good thing to invest in, I would say is, not investment advice, but when a founder of an NFT project is somebody who's got a lot on the line and is asking people to buy in, I think that's got to go a long way.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing if you've been around for years and you run into someone anonymous, but you kind of have the you have sort of like relational social proof of that person through your own network, or can get to know them in some way, but just coming into the space fresh, that was the obvious way to go.
So one of the things that you've been very active in the community, and like almost right away after the PixelBeast mint, you were like already stirring with creativity and kind of like bringing that to the group and like sharing that with everybody. And the main way that you've been doing that is through writing and telling stories, and like at this point, almost are taking the lead in world building with the PixelBeast story and Beastopia. I know I've been kind of adding to that a bit with my wizard and Alice and the Beastinator and things. So I'm really interested, like, what is your kind of big picture vision for Beastopia and for the PixelBeast? And, I think one of the things I'm kind of really curious about right now is that like this distinction between the people who picked up PixelBeast and then just kind of like ran with it and started being creative and coming up with things. Not necessarily like we ever got an invitation that was like, hey, do you want to be the person who's going to do this? But like, something inspired you to the point where you just decided, you know what, without any other person kind of like telling me I should do this or whatever, I'm just going to take it on and dive in and do it. So I guess 2-part question. One, what inspired you to dive in and start doing that? And 2, how do you see it unfolding? Like, what is this like PixelBeast story that you are aiming to tell?
Yeah. So I think the thing at the heart of the answer at the heart of all of that is play. And you said at that first town hall that you kind of saw your job as to bring the fun, and that kind of led Rye to come up with the let's fucking play thing, and which I think is terrific. It really is. There's a lot more power in that than I think a lot of people realize. For me, it started with the first PixelBeast I picked up was this fox. I decide, and I think maybe Yohei had been made a request, like, tell us a little something about your PixelBeast. So I wrote this like very, like a 3-tweet vignette based on the characteristics of the fox and the nemesis and the best friend, etc. I actually have there's like a secret backstory for the fox that's may be a very long time before it gets revealed, but that's something else. And then the next thing that happened was, so this was, I think Mint Day was a Friday, if I remember correctly. I had written a little bio for the Fox. I decided to go pick up a few more PixelBeasts. I, was seeing what was happening on the Discord and all the energy. And I was like, okay, I'm going to, actually go in more on this one. And then I started thinking, what might bios for the other ones be? But the real inflection point was that my wife, Maria, who is really, like, I'm the face of the operation, but she's really, in some ways, like, at least as much of the creative force as I am. She, just brief diversion, but she had a stroke about a little less than 8 years ago, and although she's very close now to a complete recovery, the care she got that day was borderline miraculous. She's still kind of a little shy of being in public face of anything. Hopefully that'll evolve as all this goes on. And so, and that's been a huge part of my life for the last 7-8 years, is being a caregiver. That's probably been my number one job, is just, kind of figuring out how to help her put herself back together. And so when something inspires her, that's very important to me. And so it was Saturday morning. We had set the day aside to just kind of hang out. And she came downstairs and I showed her the little bio for the Fox. And she said, let's do this today. Okay. So we sat down and she came up with most of the next one. And, kind of for all of them, she is at the very least provided the creative direction. She has like completely spiked a couple that I've written for not having the right vibe.
It's important to have a good editor.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a funny dynamic where it's like she doesn't quite have enough energy to be doing them with me all the time. But the more we do it together, the better they are. And there's something in that, one of the things about writing a novel is it's a very solo pursuit. The truth with this book was that it was always something that was like a co-creation with me and my wife, which is one of the reasons it's taken a long time, because it's only been able to get so far without her. And I can see the exact missing pieces. And one of the nice things this is doing is giving us something to start kind of flexing our creative muscles together again. So that was awesome. Really the inspiration to start doing more of these stories. And then, then it starts picking up a momentum where other people start to play. So, at some point, Pejman posted a picture of his, primary avatar, the dog with the laser eyes and the halo and wings. And I think I said on Twitter, that guy obviously has a story to tell. And he got excited and we exchanged some DMs, and that, ends up leading to, I get Maria involved. The longest of the vignettes we've done, I think it's like a 20-tweet thread on life of that one. And then, from there, I talked to Yohei a little bit about what it might take to create a shared universe for all the PixelBeasts. And, how do you do that? How do you do a decentralized storytelling project in a way that's not just in a way that's still got cohesion? What's the balance between, kind of authorship, the kind of thing that tends to only happen when like a small number of writers are together working on a story that, in kind of collaborating in a fairly dense way, versus the other kind of magic that happens when you have a lot of people doing things and, all kind of going off in all sorts of directions, and you get more unexpected stuff that way.
Yeah, like to me it seems like the difference between you know, obviously you want it to be inclusive. This is like a community, and so we're trying to build something that like everyone can be a part of and contribute to. But at the same time, like, where do you get the cohesion that is able to like take a story from beginning to end without getting totally sidetracked in, you know, side quests?
Yeah.
You know, like I've been drawing from Zelda a lot as like a personal like you know, way to relate with PixelBeast. It's probably the pixels and the fact that like I've been a long time Zelda fan, especially that's like one of the only video games I've managed to like get into like my adult life at all. I like made time for Zelda when it came out on the Switch, but you know, same kind of with Lord of the Rings. Like there's like the main story arc, and there are these like side quests that happen, but really like you need that cohesion of getting the ring back to Mordor in order to like, you know, really tell that, to like conclude the story or like make it feel whole. I think like a lot of TV shows kind of suffer from that, where like it starts out with like a really solid idea and it's going somewhere, but then like a few seasons in, maybe they're just kind of like going all over the place, and you're like, this started going one direction, but now like it just seems like they're throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. How do you like see, like in that way, do you almost feel like as, you know, part of like principal world builder at this point, I would almost say, even, you know, bigger than just writing, but probably like in a way keeping track of like the history and the lore and the, you know, building maps between like all the characters and sort of where they are and where they're going. How do you see yourself sort of like as like almost like the editor or like you know, there's more to this I think than just writing. Like it's more than just being like the creator behind a certain story, but now it's like nurturing this inclusive process and also, you know, kind of keeping it on the rails at the same time. And is that something you anticipated at the beginning, or is that something that is just kind of unfolding and now you're like finding yourself in that role? And is that something that you are, you know, excited about? Or
yeah, I mean, it definitely is more the latter in terms of you know, kind of unfolding from one week to the next. But the sense I had from the get-go was that it was going to be more like as much like building a startup as it was going to be like telling a story, right? Like that it was going to be a matter of you know, coming up with a general vision for like how to do the thing, and then starting to see what people that would attract. And right now, what my thinking is as of today is I'm trying to see if we can get, you know, at least a few more experienced writers in to kind of create like a writer's room to do like you know, to move the core story forward. That's like, it's like the origin story for PixelBeast, and it can kind of start to give everyone a shared sense of the universe. And then from there, you know, start to do that, and also start to build just the characteristics of the world itself, and start to try and get that to people in a way that makes it easier for them to start telling their own stories for like, who are these Pixel Beasts? How does their world work? What kind of adventures or stories might they have? So, you know, like the core story kind of does some of that, but it's also to just kind of like spark people's imaginations.
So you have a core story, like that's a thing you've already started, and like, I mean, I've seen a little bit that you've been sharing, but is it like, do you have like a kind of a roadmap for the story itself and when you're going to start like bringing other people into it?
Oh, so as far as I have started to talk to a couple of other writers about you know, seeing if they might be interested in joining PixelBeast and starting to contribute to the story. And you know, I mean, there's some more thinking than what's in that doc, but it's not so much that like it hasn't felt like completely worth updating it yet, because right now I'm more focused on getting more people involved. And by the way, if there's anyone in Pixel Beasts who wants to be like more actively involved in helping to craft that, please drop me a DM.
Or outside Pixel
Or
Beast.
outside PixelBeast who hears this. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, right now it's just a matter of getting a small handful of writers together because I don't, even if I, could just do the whole, whether this ends up being like feeling like a screenplay or a novella or I don't think it's going to be all text because there's too much fun art and that just makes it more, and the kind of vibe of all of Web3 is very visual.
Yeah, when you're talking about it, actually, like I've been having visions of like at the beginning of Lord of the Rings in the book. There's some of the editions, I guess. There's like an actual map,
Yeah.
and it shows like the various areas of the world, like on that map. Or even like I had a similar vision of like the map of Disneyland and
Yes.
kind of like the different regions. Or even in Zelda, when you go to the menu and you're like looking at the zoomed out world, and it's like here's the desert, and here's the like ocean region, and here's the mystical forest or whatever.
Oh
And,
yeah.
like, so like in my mind, I mean, I as an artist, right? Like my inclination is to be like, okay, like let's tell me the like different environments and like let's start building this map because like I would love to actually have this like visual model that people can start referencing. Like, oh yeah, like there's the the Central Kingdom or whatever, and
Right.
there's the mystical woods. Like I know in my stories I've been making with Alice and stuff, I talk about like the mystical woods. I even told a story about like going, in the bit of story that I've been creating, right, is with one of the Pixel Beasts is a wizard, and that wizard has been bringing Pixel Beasts to life in order to like animate them and give them characters, which has manifested as people now that I'm making these avatars for other members of the community. And so the first Pixel Beast brought to life by the wizard was a character named Alice, and Alice like escaped from the wizard after the wizard kind of went mad after bringing her to life, and then she ran off to the mystical woods where she encountered a being, and the being, like she was super hungry, and the being gave her some mushrooms, and she had a vision on them, after eating these mushrooms, and then discovered that her name was Alice, and that we're all connected, and kind of this, which honestly is like a story that comes from my personal life, which I've just like translated now into my Pixel Beasts. But I've really enjoyed telling that story and kind of creating these environments. Going off to the mystical woods, having this sort of Frankenstein wizard who is bringing Pixel Beasts to life and kind of going mad. And I mean, especially I'm personally interested in sort of like the I don't want to say the darker side of Pixel Beast, but so much of it is very light and like lighthearted that I think like one of the characters I've created is kind of a bad guy, and like having like a nemesis or like somebody sort of acting as like the the catalyst to conflict. Because I think like in this world, like if everything was just like happy and awesome all the time, like maybe there wouldn't be a whole lot going on. And so like I'm also trying to like figure some of these things out for myself and then through play. Like it's not even a matter of that I want to like dictate these things upon other people or like on the community. No one has to like play along necessarily with the like world that I've been creating, although it's been really awesome to see you guys jump in with your avatars and sort of start playing along also like in that environment too. So
Well, thank you for making those.
yeah, I mean, it's so much fun, right? Like, so, like this is something that I'm super excited about and interested. Also, I mean, clearly I think, it's going to take a team. And so it's so great to have you kind of like leading the way with this world building, writing out the story and bringing it all to life. And so, I'm really excited about it and I'm grateful that you're doing it. I guess I kind of mentioned a little bit before and whatever, but, can you share like with everyone who's watching this, just a little bit of what the road, I know we're still kind of in the early stage where we're trying to bring people in and get involved. We definitely want to have as many people contribute as we can and find a way to make that so that it's inclusive and, we have the opportunity to have a lot of different voices and perspectives. But also, personally, like, I would love to see some, artifacts start coming from this story. Even the other day you mentioned something about possibly like minting the first draft of the story as like, a way to archive or like remember or like honor the space that we're in now. And, part of the thing in PixelBeast community that we've also kind of started now is Mint Day was October 8th. And so we're celebrating the 8th of every month as our mooniversary, right? Is that what you called it the other day?
I called it that the other day. And one of the vignettes I had October 8th being the Beastopia New Year.
Even taking those snapshots of the story, like on those monthly marks, almost makes sense to me, right? Like, like even if it's maybe we do it on Tezos or something where it's a little less committal than Ethereum, but I love that idea, like of committing, where we're at and like where we're going, and I'm excited to see what happens. So, do you have like an idea or like a rough sense of like when you would like to start committing some of these things to more artifact sort of?
I don't. I think there's something kind of fun about just doing it, like you said, like just snapshots of where it is every month. And like committing things to artifacts is different than committing things to canon, right? I mean, in a writing process, you have to be willing to, I mean, especially as you're still getting the people together, to iterate on things and to say like, okay, these 5 things we thought earlier are just going out the window. I mean, I think because some of this stuff is coming just directly from the attributes of the PixelBeast themselves and from the vibe of the PixelBeast themselves, I think some of the stuff is very likely going to stay. I think it's pretty likely that we're going to stick with the basic storyline of, we have a real world storyline where PixelBeast is exists in the imagination of a little girl and yet also has a life of its own.
That was a big drop. I mean, like that kind of blew my mind. I had no idea about that. So that alone was like, that's awesome.
Well, I think, because that is very resonant to, like I wanted a story that captures a little bit of the feeling of Web3 and of, the kind of people's longing for a more creative world, and a world in which their creativity is more valued and is more honored. And so I wanted a story that would kind of start with that longing and play a little bit with the obstacles to that in the world we've built today, and also with the incredible opportunity that is out there to shape a world in which there's a lot more possibility for stuff like that, and ultimately there's some fairly easy ways of making it so that making that pretty expansive, so that it it can go beyond Beastopia as it exists today. I mean, one of the things I did think of, I've talked to one person who draws maps of fictional places, not like existing ones. Like he makes up the place for a map, potentially to do a map for Beastopia. One of the things I find interesting, it's always kind of fun to work with a few constraints on something like this. And, there's only, I think, 5 terrain types, which fits in terms of the attributes of the beast, which fits nicely with like an 8-bit game. Like if you go back and look at the map for the original Zelda, it's pretty small. So I thought like, okay, like one thing that would be kind of fun would be to do like a pretty simple map for Beastopia in its first iteration. But then, part of the story can be about how does this evolve? And that's going to go along with how does the little girl's imagination evolve? How does, and that will be tied into some other things in her life.
That's how actual maps work. Yeah. Like, if you look back at maps from like the 14 and 1500s, like no 2 maps were the same.
Yeah.
They tried, right? Like I think like at a certain point, like everybody kind of started agreeing on certain things and features. But there are maps where like the shapes of the different continents are like wildly different. Even, the idea that Columbus had that he would find the Indies and even that where he landed was the Indies, is still, very like they had no clue.
Yes.
And so, even a lot of, and they were the like authorities of their time. So to be like creating these maps and then sharing them with everything, and this is like the truth of what is. But then, the next person who came along was like, actually, we got a little bit more detail. Like, here's a little bit more accurate version of that map. And I think even now, like, only because of satellites and things, like we're still constantly evolving our understanding of the map or the terrain of like where we are and what's going on. So it makes complete sense.
And I'd say the maps of our interior worlds are much closer to those very early crude maps than we think, as of today, which is one of the things that we can have a little fun with. Yeah. So I do think, things like maps, drafts, what have you, can be, we can take snapshots, they can be minted. I think that can be a lot of fun for everyone involved, even as we kind of iterate towards something that becomes more like a little bit more like canon. And of course, then, somewhere in there, even just with that core canon exercise, like, the community can weigh in. And then ultimately that can build to something where the community actually, is making stories. And, one of the things that I've been inspired by is just seeing how communities around games or I get the sense that this culture runs deepest in anime, where but it's also there in fanfic, in fantasy and science fiction, where the line between reader and creator has gotten blurrier and blurrier over time. And I'd love to create an environment that really harnesses that. But I think the best way to do it is not to start with just like a total bottom up, like no rules kind of situation, but to kind of create some structure that people can work in. And because that makes it for much easier there's a reason that fanfic is popular. There's a reason that, it's easier to write in someone else's world first and, kind of stretch your muscles, learn how they work.
It kind of goes back to that like very first question we started with today, which was like, what do you think the difference is between sort of the people who like just jumped in right away with no invitation and started building things, and what I think is kind of the larger community of people who are sort of waiting to see where their place is and like find their place within the community and then figure like how they can contribute and add to it, which almost like requires a bit of an invitation, and it does require laying that foundation or groundwork in order for them to then kind of dive in and start taking on their thing from there. I mean, I also, as you're talking about this, I've kind of thought of the process as building a castle stone by stone or brick by brick, right? Where, as you're writing the story, you're kind of like laying the foundation first, and then you're kind of going around and you're sort of building up from that foundation. But I now understand better that rather than like building the castle without a blueprint and then, getting to the point where you're like putting on the roof and you realize like, oh, I did not do this right. We need to take down like half of this building in order to like be able to put the roof on in the proper way. It really does require actually building out these blueprints and kind of getting things prepared ahead of time, because you don't really want to have to invent a time machine in your story after you've developed, the walls and, kind of gotten it all along the way, and then been like, oh, we need to figure out how to get the roof on this building. Well, there's a time machine and we're going to go back to the beginning, and that's actually going to butterfly effect the whole thing. And that's how we can get the roof on the building. And I know a lot of stories do that. That seems like a more of a modern kind of way of solving some of these like storyline
retconning
things.
Yes.
What do you see coming from this story after we get it developed? Is that, are you excited to see that be integrated into the game? I know still the game is also a very nebulous concept that we're all sort of working on together, but it does seem like it's really starting to materialize into something. Do you see that maybe being like a show, like a eventual kind of episodic?
I mean, I think I think all of that is possible, and I think ideally it'll all happen. And the other thing that I'm really hoping will happen soon and continue to build some momentum is, I talked about this just a tiny bit in the town hall. We have a vision for what PixelBeast can be that it's almost like in its it's like ultimate form is like a Web3 version of like a Disney attached to like an Andreessen Horowitz or something like that, right? Where there's a startup, the huge like startup creation ecosystem on the one hand, and then like great like shared universe creative engine on the other, and that they're all that they're both working together. And there's something that the fact of combining those two would not have been obvious pre-Web3, but that combination of culture and tech seems to be really resonant and powerful here. What I've seen so far is that we have more people kind of coming in from the building side, and that makes sense because Web3, it's tech. It's a little scary to creative types, or just it looks like something that's not for them. So I hope that as this gets going, we start to pull in more people who are interested in the creative side, and that it starts to create a model and a sense of possibility for creative folks in general and writers in particular, that there's something here that's not going to be extractive. The folks I've talked to so far, they're really, they have a lot of PTSD basically from how creatives have been treated in the Web 2 era, and their sense that like, oh, there's a tech thing. Yeah, I don't want to do that. Like we always just get burned. And I hope that, some more people come in and start to get interested in the possibility here and start to see what, certainly a lot of the investors are seeing here, that this is a paradigm where, the people, the creators are actually like on par with the tech people, and that it can be highly collaborative. It's not like us against them. It doesn't have to be like that. I'm super lucky as a novelist to like have like a great publisher and all that. But like, I'd love to see us start to create a world in which like a typical, like going into storytelling is as like safer career opportunity as going into software development.
A lot of the criticisms I've seen from like my artist community have just been around like the expense of getting involved with NFTs or, crypto in general, especially with gas fees where they are right now and stuff, and feeling like, hey, this seems like something only for privileged people. And, what I've been sharing with them and explaining is like, by bringing your creativity to the project, you can actually leverage, what you have to offer in a way that's never been possible before, like show up with your creativity and be a member of a community with a bunch of people who do have a lot of resources and are interested in backing the type of creativity that you're willing to offer. I think if as someone who doesn't have a lot of money in order to buy into the community and ecosystem and things, if you show up with creativity and you start offering what you have to offer, you will be invited into the community. And I think that PixelBeast, especially with the fellowship and accelerator and the different aspects of what's going on within PixelBeast, will have an on-ramp for those people and potentially be able to help creatives who don't see themselves as being able to access this new wave of Web3 and NFTs because of some of the buy-in cost in order to get involved, are able to see that their creativity is actually the thing that is so desperately needed and will allow them to access and become part of this community. I mean, I've even explained to people like how, buying a PixelBeast, which is only a few $100s comparatively, has now opened up this world of access into community of founders and investors and developers who, normally would require far significant investment in order to be a part of that community or to get a seat at the table. And just showing up with creativity is enough. It is the thing that is opening doors, which, I don't think existed prior to this in the same way. So I would hope, more people could see that and would want to get involved purely for the act of sharing their talents and skills that maybe they have felt burned on in the past, or maybe they've got a little PTSD, and, this really is the invitation. Like, we would, let me and Adam be your examples of, your creativity is not only welcomed, it's wanted, and we would love to have you. So,
yeah, I mean, I think the part of the Web3 ethos that is in some sense hardest to get people to believe is that right now there's a moment where everyone can succeed together, and it's not super hierarchical, and it's not a situation where that's the line people are using to really just extract a lot of value and get rid of themselves, without taking everyone along with them. And I think whether or not that ends up being where Web3 lands in the long run, and I hope it does, I think it's going to be like that for quite some time now. And I think, frankly, I think part of what's going to determine where it lands is, the extent to which, creators get in and really start, not just making the things, but getting a seat at the table. At these kind of early stages, and having input into everything, including how all this stuff gets built. I think there's like an incredible possibility in all that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super inspired by all of your thinking, and just talking to you gets me so excited about all the possibilities and the different things that we're all working on. I find some peace. I'm the kind of person where if there's something that needs to be done, typically I'll just dive in and do it. I'm not going to wait around for someone else to do something. So often that looks like me trying to do too many things, or, doing things that maybe aren't my specialty, or that I'm maybe not the best at. And I find a lot of peace in knowing that the PixelBeast community has a lot of very skilled and knowledgeable and experienced people in the finance part of things, and in the the DAO, and the DAO work group, I think, is probably one of the most subscribed groups within PixelBeast, right? And so I find a lot of peace in that there's a lot of people who are working on that, better, more intelligent people who are doing that part, and so likewise, I'm leaning into the creative part, and I'm really grateful that you are also leaning into the creative part too. So, thank you so much for that, and for sharing all of this with us today. Is there anything that you would like to leave the community with, to end the podcast?
Let's fucking create.
Yeah, let's fucking play. Awesome. Thanks, Adam. See ya.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.